Stay with us. We're staying on the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and Ukrainian drone and shelling attacks have reportedly killed at least 3 people in Russia, while Russian bombardments on East Ukraine forced the evacuation of a maternity centre in Kharkiv and wounded 9. Meanwhile, Russian air defence systems intercepted 155 Ukrainian drones overnight, that according to local officials. An attack that comes after Russia pounded Ukraine in successive nightly attacks targeting the capital Kyiv. Both Kyiv and Moscow have stepped up their aerial strikes over recent months as the Kremlin rejects calls to halt its 3-year war. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said a medical facility was hit in the overnight attack. Well, Ross, deaths reported in Russia, further strikes in Ukraine on a 3rd night of bombardment that has seen deaths in the capital Kyiv and other regions as well. Is this war, in your opinion, at a boiling point? And does diplomacy really need to prevail now, with deaths not just on the front lines, but also potential civilian deaths being reported from both countries?
Unfortunately, civilian deaths, especially in Ukraine, have been part of this conflict since Russia invaded Ukraine in February of 2022. There was probably a time when President Trump might have been angry at Ukraine for causing civilian deaths in Russia, but given President Trump's recent criticisms of Russia, including directly of President Putin, I don't think President Trump is necessarily going to be angry that a Ukrainian attack within Russia killed civilians. But yeah, you ask about diplomacy and world opinion. One thing that has also been present throughout this conflict is the constant speculation: who could bring the two sides together? Could it be the United States? At times there was discussion about China, there was discussion about Israel, there was discussion about Turkey, where some of the ceasefire talks have been held. There's even been talk about the Pope playing that role, and now there's a new Pope, and there's talk about the new Pope playing that role. But no one up to now has ever been able to play that role, including the United Nations Secretary General. So it's hard to be optimistic that any of these other potential players could bring about a ceasefire, other than President Trump, because the United States can put pressure on Ukraine by withholding weapons, and because President Trump, as he likes to say, he has a good relationship with President Putin.
Yes, let's look towards diplomacy and towards peace. Of course, 2 rounds of direct negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. The first in over 3 years. They were held, of course, in Istanbul. It seems that the action that we're seeing on the battlefield, but also the level of strikes that are taking place, signal that peace couldn't be further away. Do you think that that is suiting both countries? Why would Russia or Ukraine want to continue this war, and why would they want to stop it, with Russia reportedly making gains on the battlefield and on the ground?
Well, the reason why they'd want to stop it is exhaustion. The militaries of both sides are exhausted. The cost in death and injury to military personnel has been tremendous. The cost in civilian deaths has been tremendous within Ukraine, and to a lesser extent in Russia. They might want to continue with those to hold more ground for when and if they actually are ready to have ceasefire talks. And a lot of the speculation is President Putin is reluctant to reach a ceasefire at the moment because there seems to be some momentum, however slow that front line moves. And it does move very slowly, no matter how many men Russia throws into the fight. But there does seem to be some momentum with Russia to capture more land within Ukraine, within the sections of Ukraine that Russia says it wants to annex. So it seems that Putin does have some motivation to continue the fight, because every day that the fight continues, that Russia does take over a little bit more Ukrainian territory.
Yes, absolutely. Ross Feingold.